Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome on our today's or this year Tesena Fest Online. I would like to welcome all of our speakers. We will host today 3 brilliant speakers. One is Martin Škarbala or Furbo. The second one is Blerina Nasto, and then from Raiffeisenbank. And then we have 2 more speakers from eBay talking about their experience from testing on their project within their organization. So thank you very much, guys, joining us. And I'll first invite Furbo or Martin Škarbala, and he will talk about testing in Kiwi. So hi, Furbo, or Martin, or what do you prefer?
Hi, Marcel, and hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today on this lovely event. Today, I would like to speak a little bit about how we started to reform the QA department in Kiwi.com. So let me first share the screen and share my lovely presentation. I hope everything works well. Can you see it? Can you give me a sign that it works?
Yeah, all good.
Okay. So we can briefly start. So hello again. My name is Martin Škarbala, and currently I'm working as a head of QA in Kiwi.com. And today I would like to speak a little bit about how we started to reform the QA department in Kiwi.com. But before we get into the action points, I would maybe like to describe the history of the QA department. Well, starting with the prologue, where it all started. Well, if you don't know Kiwi.com, you probably know, but it's a global flights online travel agency that simply can find the flights that our competitors cannot. So we are connecting flights of basically airlines that usually don't cooperate with each other. And it started all as a startup somewhere in 2011, and it has rapidly grown ever since then. And as I'm talking rapidly, I'm talking about from 3 core employees in 2012 and up to 2,500 in basically 7 years. So the biggest challenge by the startups is not to basically come up with an idea and turn it into a valuable product, but the biggest challenge is actually to survive the race. And it was pretty challenging for Kiwi.com. So basically, where are we now? We are at around 2,500 employees. And how is it connected actually to the QA department? Why I'm talking about this? Well, the thing is that the pressure at Kiwi.com was mainly to fulfill the customer needs and to deliver new projects and new features. So the history of QA in Kiwi.com, well, the QA teams were basically created on demand when it was needed to. So basically testing some front-end application, testing, for example, the backend of the booking of our booking process, testing the mobile apps. But it was also always pressure on delivery. And well, to find good testers at such a scale, it's always challenging. So there is also some technical knowledge missing. So this is the history of the QA. So there were some issues to solve in the QA department. We had to define a completely new QA roles and new career ladder in the QA department. We had to create a mission, which turns out to be actually a very valuable thing to do. We had to set up a clear structure in QA, define reporting lines, define actually the metrics that will help us to improve and eventually improve. So let's take these action points into some smaller case studies, how we have approached that. The first of all was defining a mission. This sounds like an obsolete work to do. Like defining a mission sounds something like, okay, I will define a mission so the management will be happy, and I will basically glue some buzzwords together. But it turns out that defining a mission is pretty valuable thing to do. We have been playing with usual buzzwords like automation, quality, transparency, bug, or agile. But none of this is actually true. Our mission is not to automate everything. We automate or we use automation as a tool to be faster. Our main mission is not to find the bugs, because well, bugs is only a result of our work, not the main goal that we want to achieve. And agile and transparency, I just put it on the slides just to have two more buzzwords to fill in the green space. So we have been thinking about how the mission should look like, how the mission should support then all the decisions on the tactical level, and how it will help to define the metrics where we can improve. And basically, we come up with something like this. We want to ensure in QA that, well, Kiwi.com is developed fast and delivered with confidence. Develop fast means that it's then our job to speed up not only the testing with some automation, but to find some weak spots in the QA process where we can improve. And confidence, basically, again, it combines the way how we operate, how we release, and how the developers ship their features. Because in Kiwi.com, we don't ship the whole product at once. We have multiple teams releasing maybe multiple times a day. So how this mission supports us in the future? Well, it turns out it's very helpful, because it helps us to decide on the tactics. Like every meeting or every decision that we make, we can always ask ourselves, like, okay, does this decision support the overall mission? If yes, we are good to go. So we don't need to spend time brainstorming, like, what should we do next? We always can get back to the mission and ask ourselves, okay, does it support our overall goal? It helps us to define the goals. So basically, by the QA department, we are defining the new goals on a quarter basis. So for each quarter, we are defining that we want to be actually faster. We want to improve some processes. We want to get better at automation, to have more reliable tests, and many others. And it also helps us by defining the metrics that will help us to improve. Then we had to define some QA objectives. So basically, some underlining claims about this mission. So as a QA, we are here to provide an independent view on the quality. We don't want to find the bugs, but we want to develop QA processes that actually prevent them to reach the production. And we want to build reliable test automation that accelerates the whole engineering process. So this was all about the mission, some high level objective. And let's move to another topic, which is defining the new roles and the career ladder. And this is probably the most interesting question, or most interesting topic, since I have been just browsing through the LinkedIn, and I have seen like dozens of alternatives of how the QA engineer job could be described. And it may sound something like this. We have automation testers, we have QA testers, test engineer, QA test engineer, and all the combination of these, you can find it everywhere. And from my experience, the role of the automation tester, like the person who only focuses on automation, will eventually end up by a person that only maintains the automated solution. And over the time, he will lose the bond with the product. So having this in mind, we have been thinking like, how can we combine the role of manual testing, automation testing, and so on? And the solution is pretty simple. We don't want to define some QA tester position. And actually, there is no such thing as a manual or automated tester, as James Bach claims. And I have to strongly agree with this one. What I believe is that the tester or a QA engineer should involve the role of the analytic, should involve the role of a manual exploratory expert, and also the test automation engineer. Nevertheless, there is no such thing as a QA tester. I strongly believe this is only a combination of a QA engineer and a tester that needs to be somehow fancy promoted to the potential candidates. So either go for IT tester or either go for QA engineer. We wanted to shift our manual efforts towards the automation. And as I have said before, we didn't want to create a separate automation team within each development team. So basically, we have decided to go with the one simple position, which is basically the QA engineer. Again, it may sound really simple, but for many companies that I have seen, there are multiple positions that are complicated to actually know what this person is responsible for. So basically, we want to simplify this as much as possible. What do we expect from such a QA engineer? Just some 3 points to highlight. We want to have these people judgmental as much as they can. We want these people to criticize the work that they are doing. So we want to hear their voice and hear their feedback on what they are doing. We want them to be curious as a little child, and we want them to be excellent when it comes to this automation. Based on that, we have created a very simple career ladder, which consists at the very core from a simple position that is the QA engineer. Or below that, we have the junior QA engineer, and basically here is the fork to individual contributor or managerial track. Again, as you can see, maybe one thing to spot here and to highlight here. Again, you can see that, for example, the QA lead should also have some technical knowledge that we expect from a QA engineer, some automation knowledge, and we expect also from our manager to have the knowledge of test automation to the level that they can basically evaluate if the automation is helping us or not, or if the automation is needed in a team at all. I have been in the companies where the managers were lacking the technical knowledge, and it was then crucial for the team to improve. With the new positions, we have created a new organizational structure, which basically consists of three main divisions. Just some important numbers here. We have 37 of QA engineers in kv.com. We have divided them into 3 simple divisions that I will introduce afterwards, and we have basically 7 QA teams. So the first division, there are 6 QA teams responsible for basically testing the separate modules that are responsible for searching the flights, booking the flights, and some post-booking services. So as a customer, when I come to kv.com, I can, for example, buy some additional services or change something. Then we are testing the customer support system, so our internal tools, and as well we are testing Tequila, which is our B2B program for our partners to also use our engine. When it comes to test automation, what tools do we use here? Mainly we are using Cypress.io, and then we have also solutions for Selenium and Python, where Cypress.io has its own limitations, so we are combining power of both of them to get the basically the optimal result. Then we have next division, which is the mobile division, and there is one QA team responsible for both of the platforms, both of our native applications. And what tools do we use here? We don't like Appium, but we rather use native frameworks, which is XCUITS or Espresso for Android or iOS. Then we have a third division, which is basically the backend division. And there are teams are responsible for basically fintech, so all the in payments, out payments, all the backend systems that are responsible for getting or money in or money out are tested by this team. Then is booking and ancillaries responsible for basically the whole booking flow and buying some additional services. Test automation is done here basically in our core language, a core backend language, which is the Python. A little bit about the QA metrics. Here we have decided we don't want to just create the numbers for numbers, but we basically create rules for ourselves. We create the rules that will help us eventually to improve and show some weak spots in our processes. And again, we have been thinking about the metrics like automation coverage of our framework or automation efforts, but this again doesn't support our main mission. What I strongly believe that the automation solutions should be reliable, and at one of the conferences I have heard that I would rather have 10 automated tests that will pass than have 100 flaky automated tests. So we are also paying attention to the flakiness. So let's introduce the metrics that help us actually to improve. The first one is basically time to test, and the time to test is basically the metric that supports the first claim of the mission. Like we want to develop new features fast. So we are basically measuring how much time does it take from the feature that is ready to be basically tested. So developer finishes his work until the feature is ready to be merged. So basically the time between that, we are measuring that. How much time in average does it take basically to for the tester to get to the feature and to test it so it can be released. The next metric that we are using is the metric of escaped bugs. So how many in the production, and from this metric we can learn what actually type of bugs appear in the production and where do we have holes in our QA processes. And the third metric, as I mentioned, is a flakiness of automated tests. So basically, for example, with Cypress, you have a great dashboard with analytics of how many tests are randomly failing or passing. So let's get to the first metric, the time to test. As I mentioned, what do we measure? We measure average time, so between ready to test and to be merged. And based on this data, we can improve the QA processes. We can improve the automation in the selected team, or we can reallocate the resources. So basically, we want to have our QA engineers more dynamically reallocate table. So what that means is basically that if, for example, one team is having a basically more delivery assigned, we can reallocate our engineers and help the targeted team. Simple as that. We can see a simple drop. In August there have been vacations, so it doesn't count. But between July and September we have done some changes in the way we test in one team, and you can see that the time to test, the average time to test, significantly dropped. When it comes to test automation, as I mentioned, the metrics should be supporting the way we release and the way we operate. Just for the search part of our page, we are having 8 releases, approximately 8 releases a month, which translates to basically 8 times manually checking the whole regression for the only the search part of our web application, which translates to basically capacities that we currently have. And from the automation point of view, we have basically 351 automated tests that basically cover the whole regression, and we are running 1,000 pipelines per month, which also means the release pipeline, which also means the merge request pipeline. and this translates into 351,000 tests executed per month. Just for your imagination, it will translate into having 120 manual testers to go through this, and we have basically on search only 3 of them. When it comes to flakiness, as I mentioned, the flakiness is a great analytics tool in Cypress, which gives you a great overview of basically how many tests are randomly passing or failing. So if some tests need to be retried, it is considered as flaky, and this pretty much points out the reliability of your automation solutions. So we are keeping a close eye on that, and we want to keep it in some healthy level. So for me, a healthy level would mean 0 to 10% of the flakiness should be practically okay. So the main takeaways from this presentation is I learned that defining a mission might be pretty useful when you want to restructure a new QA department. As I mentioned, it helps you pretty much with doing all the next steps, like doing a career ladder, doing a defining metrics, defining automated solutions, and decision on every single meeting. The second takeaway for you is don't make the QA positions too complicated. As I mentioned, I strongly believe that that the QA engineer should be a combined role of test analyst, test automation engineer, manual tester. As it turns out, from the hiring perspective, like finding these people is not so easy, because if you are looking for a senior software tester or senior QA engineer, it turns out that they want only to focus on the automation, and on the other side, you have plenty of manual testers that would like to learn the automation. So finding a sweet spot here and something in the middle, some people that actually would like to focus on automation and manual testing. It's not very easy, but it turns out to be a great strategy. Then the last takeaway: define a clear metrics, but keep in mind that you don't need to create just number for numbers for some higher management, but define the metrics that you can make actionable afterwards. So you can make clear action points from them. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to put some numbers in Google Sheets and just create some lovely graphs, which doesn't make any sense and doesn't help you. This is everything. I believe I'm right in time. So thank you again very much. This was a brief introduction of how we started with the QA reformation in Kiwi.com. It's a long run, so we have achieved this basically in 1 year, but there are pretty many challenges in what do we want to achieve. Basically, we would like to introduce some new types of testing. We would like to be even faster and have even more bugs in the production. Thank you, everyone. And if you have any questions, I think you can use actually Slido. So if you have any of them, I will probably stop sharing. And Marcel, if you can help me out here, what should I do? I will stop sharing.
Yes. Just wait.
That's it. Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much. It was awesome. And I'll now share the screen with the questions. And I'm really surprised and happy that we have so many, because usually we don't. So hopefully now you can see the screen. And I'll try to read it for you, but maybe you will be quicker. But the suggestion from last year was that we should read as a host the questions for the speaker. So why you don't like Appium? That was the first and most popular question.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I don't like Appium. I would rather say that from the performance point of view and from the stability point of view, the native frameworks are much more confident and much more reliable. I have been working actually with Appium for one of the projects in my previous jobs, and it was pretty easy to use. It is basically the same approach that Selenium has. It basically triggers command remotely, and this wasn't it was pretty stable, but as it turns out, the native frameworks gives you even much more reliability and speed. So basically, that is the main reason.
Okay, so the speed and stability is the
Right. Correct.
For you. Okay, so the next one for a vote for that one. What about performance testing? What tools do you use, or how do you handle it? Do you have any regular feedback or ad hoc?
Interesting question. There are separate levels of performance testing. Basically, there is web performance, there is backend performance. We are currently experimenting with Locust. So basically, we want to test our fintech solutions with the Locust. So we will see how it works when, for example, 1,000 customers pay at the same time. We don't have it set up yet, but we are working on that. With the performance of the web, we have some brief metrics, but none of them goes too deep, and that is probably also the next challenge for us to improve also about the types of testing that we have not introduced yet. About the performance testing again, we would like to have more of that. And about the tools, I think that Cypress with the when it comes to web performance has some metrics. We have been experimenting that, but not have clear proof of concept yet. And about the backend, I would recommend a Locust.
Okay, I have the unfair advantage that I'm hosting this event today, so I would extend the question by another one or another topic, and it's security testing. Do you have security testing as a part of your QA team, or it's something outside?
It is done separately. We don't have a security team, but we have it covered.
Okay, and I just noticed that you didn't turn on your camera, so if you could, then it would be...
I'm so sorry. Okay, here I am. I didn't notice. Thank you.
Perfect. So let's go to the next one, which is also related to maybe security and performance testing, and how do you handle non-functional testing, which might be very close to the previous one. So I don't know whether you want to extend your answer or...
Well, I think we have covered the performance and we have covered the security. About other types of non-functional testing, right now, about the accessibility testing, for example, this might be a nice challenge to improve on that. When it comes to other types of tests, basically we are more or less focusing on functional testing and some extension to performance and basically security.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So let's move to the next one. Do you use Cypress end-to-end test response from real server or mocked isolated strategy? Could you say ratio those tests?
That's a great question, actually, because we are testing the most volatile thing we can, and that is basically the travel industry, and the best example here would be the whole booking process. Like if you imagine that you as a customer are booking a flight from A to B, anything can happen during the booking. So basically the flight can be delayed, canceled, whatever. And here we had a mocking service that we used to run our tests against. But on the other side, we have the backend service, which is releasing like multiple times a day. So it was hard to tell like if the mocked service is actually up to date, and it is harder to have it up to date. So we have tried, and we are trying the approach to use only the real data for the Cypress tests. So basically going end to end. Is it going okay so far? But bearing in mind that we are testing the travel industry, it's a little bit more flaky at the booking. But I would always prefer to have a real end-to-end test that can basically tell me on the merge request level that my application that I'm creating is working with a real backend.
Okay, so thank you. I will move further with the next one because we have so many questions.
Really?
We are not finished.
Okay.
I'm not finished on time, so I'll cut it on the last one.
Okay.
But one by one based on the popularity. So what is the next one? How do you find out use Python instead of using other language? What was your requirements? Okay.
Mm-hmm. I would say that well, with Python we are basically testing the backend services, and we want to proceed with that. Simple as that. The simplest question that comes to my mind is basically, if your development uses the Python, it's always good to use the same language, just in sake for better cooperation within teams. I cannot actually imagine the situation that, for example, our backend, which is written in Python, we will use the code written in Java or something like that. So it's only about the domain language that we are using.
Okay, so your primary language, like on company level, is Python. You are using Python across the backend.
Mainly,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. I would guess also some JavaScript should be there as well, and some front end will be developed in something else than Python. So that.
Yeah, writing Cypress tests requires only JavaScript. There is no other option actually.
So the Cypress was the solution for the JavaScript part.
Right. Correct.
Okay, so let's move to the next one. And this is, do you still see more challenges, improvements after this reformation? That was question from Maros.
Oh my. Yeah. The more we are trying to improve, the more challenges seems to appear on the path. So the challenge right now is to basically upskill our QA engineers, and to hire people that are smarter than us. So basically that's it. Our challenges are to be even faster when it comes to the speed. So yeah, I cannot name all of them right now, but opening this box of QA reformation kind of scaled into several improvements that we want to do.
Okay, cool. So what is the biggest one or most scary one for you?
Maybe transforming. We are my challenge is to shift the testing as close to the birth of the product as possible. So to bake the quality into the product from the very beginning. So we can see it by multiple companies, and it happens every single time that QAs are at the end of the whole process. Even if we are talking about agile, even if we are talking about some other development approach, still the QAs are at the end. So this is currently the biggest challenge to involve the QAs as much into development as the possible. And basically this I think this answers also the question from Irka, the next one, like, is it the QA independent on development? We want to integrate the QA into development as much as possible. I'm not a fan of having QA teams that are outside of the development, because, as I mentioned, for example, with the test automation, it always turns into like fixing the tests, the automated tests exposed. Like, is only creating the automated tests only for automated tests just to make them pass, and we want to integrate them right into development as much as possible. So basically, this translates into having end-to-end tests right in the merge request, actually, before merging into master, or having the developers and the QA is responsible for the testing, and not maybe some separate position or separate team.
I see. I think this is at least for me, it was one of the preferred approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that many companies are turning to that direction or trying to implement it in that way. So let's move to the next one. It's really difficult to just read the question. I would like to talk with you and discuss the topic. So that's sometimes the tough position for me. So what is the next one? How do you handle documentation, requirements, reports, RTM, etc.?
Well, all the documentation is written in the user stories. We have also the design documentation in Figma, and for the test management, we are basically using TestRail.
Okay, cool. And now I'm not sure whether maybe I skipped some. Let me, because I have too many windows open.
Okay.
Oh, which one? This is, how do you handle documentation? We reply to that one. The next one is the QA independent? We reply to that one. And then David, Ciao David, is asking, what are use cases for using Cypress versus Python with Selenium? So maybe he's asking if I've got why you decide, or what are the specific cases you decide Python rather than Cypress?
Well, basically Cypress has its own limitations. The biggest limitation here is basically it cannot go cross-domain. I know that the core philosophy of Cypress is to test what you have under control, but there are several cases where you cannot use Cypress. I'm talking about basically paying with some external service. So for example, paying with PayPal, or I'm saying about the cases like signing into Facebook account or something like that. So basically all the limitation that Cypress has, we can pretty much cover it with Selenium, and also the basically the cross-browser testing. So Cypress doesn't have a support for WebKit, so it cannot test the Safari. So we are using Cypress Selenium/Python to run some smoke tests against other browsers.
Okay, perfect. I like the next one from Parag. Do you include manual testing as a part of time to test for a new feature? If yes, how?
Yeah, correct. We are measuring the time for manual testing for new features. It doesn't look like I'm standing with the stopwatch and behind our QA engineers and measure how long does it take to test it. Basically, we are getting this data from GitLab.
Okay, and then I think this will be the last one from Maros.
Mm-hmm.
Are you utilizing any cloud solution for execution of automated tests?
Yeah, we have Lambda test.
Okay, sorry, Peter, you wasn't voted to be fit into our schedule, and now there should be 5-minute break. So maybe Furbo, I will ask you, would you like to answer the last one from Peter, or we will stop here?
How are you handling integration testing with other providers? Do you have some middleware therefore translating? I can imagine that this is really complex. Yes, it absolutely is complex. So we are basically, if we have some external provider and we want to test the solution end to end, we are using the external provider. But if we want to test only our services, we are mocking that. So I'm not sure if this answers the question, but Petro, feel free to reach me out if you have the mail address, or find me on LinkedIn, and I can explain you if you would like to give more information.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for joining us today, Furbo.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy the talk. I really enjoyed the questions and your answers. I hope you too. I'd like to introduce your talk, and this is Blerina Nasto from Raiffeisen Bank, and she will be talking about software developers in test automation. This will be talk about how to make developers do the testing with them, if I understood the description abstract properly. So we'll see. I'm really excited to hear your talk.
share my presentation now.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Hi, everyone. First of all, I'm happy to be part of this real live stories session and to share our use case in Raiffeisen Bank Albania. I'd like to tell something about myself first. It's now 15 years that I work in IT, specifically in software development. I currently am Web Technology Solutions Lead, and my team and I are responsible to develop different solutions for the products and services of the bank through the usage of web technologies. In the last 2 years, I have been also in the role of IT delivery lead for retail lending products. And while being in this role and starting to have much more wider range of responsibility, so more than just development, I have started to promote continuous testing as a very critical process in the overall process of building with speed and having the high levels of quality into the deliverables. So this presentation aims to describe our journey of how we decided and started to build test automation capabilities in our software developers profile in order to build agility in terms of speed of deliverables while having also high quality into them. Well, I think that we all can agree that when we talk about achieving agility inside a product value team or even in organization levels, there are no shortcuts to achieve it. So basically, you can just cut a different part of the process in order to arrive at the final destination earlier. It just doesn't work like that. And mostly in the agile way of working, there is more and more a need to build all the capabilities inside the team in order to complete every work inside it. So without depending on any other piece of work that is done outside of the team, or without depending on any other piece of work that is done in a silo. So, currently, there are done a lot of researches for the so-called high-performing teams, and despite many findings, I would like to mention one. One interesting finding is that there in this team exists a very strong relationship between the business success and the technical practices that the teams use in their daily work. Speaking about the two main pillars of software development and software testing, more and more in this agile software development mode is seen the need to have basically the lines between development and testing blurred. What does this mean? This means that more and more is seen the need to have basically the quality a matter of the team, of everyone involved in the team. And more is seen that the software developers are taking ownership of basically building quality into the products. And how they are doing this? They are doing this, of course, by building developer tests, which is for sure part of their responsibilities. So covering the first two layers of the test pyramids, which are unit tests and integration tests. But more and more is seen this need to have them involved in writing end-to-end tests or UI tests, which we must say boosts even more, the level of the confidence that we have about the level of the qualities that are embedded in our product. So this was just an intro, basically, to understand the demanding needs that the agile way of software development has brought into us. And now I will say something, I will give some context to this, our team, the structure and its vision. The team was created at the end of 2019 as a cross-functional team. So it was composed of a product owner, a scrum master, and a development team. It has a very ambitious vision. So basically to work and to position Raiffeisen Bank Albania as the first and best consumer lending in just one touch point by improving and offering a superior customer experience for our customer. Also, we needed to work on improving some two tangible indicators, which were having a time for approval of the loan by 30 minutes and also decreasing the work rate by the bank to 20%. Well, I remember that when the team was created at the end of 2019, we immediately understood that in order to achieve the objectives, we needed to leave the full benefits of Agile, and which are at the end. So we needed to be an autonomous and full cycle team. We needed to own the product division end to end. We needed to build faster and in a sustainable way. We needed to build quality into our deliverables, and also we needed to increase our operational effectiveness. So we understood that we as a team needed to have all the competencies in order to accomplish every work without depending on other teams outside us. The system that was in the center of our developments is Iris. It is a web application built with a front end in Angular, with a back end in .NET Web API, with an SQL database, and it runs on Chrome. Important to mention is that this is not a customer-facing application. This is an internal application, but it's very critical because it has the implementation and the automation of the overall lending process that the bank has, the full process from the moment that the customer applies for a lending product to different verifications with a set of indicators to determine the eligibility of the customer for the lending product. The preparation of contract, the disbursement of the loan in the core banking, and also it implements a lot of other after disbursement processes that are related with the maintenance of the lending products, like, for example, premature closure of the loan or increase and decrease of the limit of the credit card, etc. So basically, we can say that this application is one of the main sources of the revenues that the bank has when it comes to lending process for its retail and micro customers. Well, I remember that when we started to work in the first sprint with the team, we worked in the same way as we did before that the Agile team was created. Well, so we have taken some user stories in the respective sprint, we have developed them, and after developers has finished the features, basically they were released in the UAT environment. It's important to mention that in our bank we don't have a QA department. So every user acceptance test is done from the business. And even in this situation, our business colleagues basically were doing the user acceptance tests of the features delivered in order to determine that they were basically ready or not to be released in production. But if in the traditional way of working we have managed, to succeed in this way, because, in that way of working you have these predefined phases of the overall life cycle of deliverables where you have time, to test, to do a lot of tests. But now the situation was different. Basically, we were working with iterations, short iterations, 2 weeks generally, or sometimes even 3 weeks. And we found that it was impossible to have covered all these tests from our business colleagues in a manual way. And the problem was that basically every time that a story was completed, all the previously completed stories needs to be re-verified. So from sprint to sprint, it was obvious that the number of the completed stories that were needed to re-verified in order to check that anything was not regressed from the system was a must. And in that moment were totally handled in a manual way. So it was obvious that our team was really, not showing the work that was being done, and it was obvious that our productivity was suffocated. Basically, in an estimation that I have done for the first 10 sprints, I have found that 48% of the overall capacity of the team was spent by doing only regression tests, so manual regression tests. It's, of course, a huge capacity that, of course, can be spent in a more better way if we don't have this need to do all the regressions. In that time, developers were doing basically developer tests, so unit tests and some integration tests, mainly API tests. And even that they were taking care basically that everything passed in every code commit. At the end, they were isolated tests. So basically, when all these isolated tests were integrated to form full functionality, they couldn't guarantee that the same level of quality was preserved. So as a team, we understood that we have a problem, we have a bottleneck, and if we don't solve it, basically we couldn't be an agile team. So we weren't releasing, with speed. And of course, even the quality was lacking sometimes. So it was easy to understand this need. And it's also normal that when you have a need, the first scenario that you think is, okay, we have a need, let's try to solve it by hiring the profiles that could help us and accelerate in reducing this gap that we have. Well, in our case, this wasn't the scenario because we had, let's say, some restrictions. First of all, it's very difficult in our market to find test automation engineers. The only one that are built from specific organizations for their needs, and it's very difficult to move them, from one to another. And from the other side, as a bank, we had this limitation of, not increasing the number of FTEs in IT division. So having, these two restrictions, it was obvious that the only way to solve this bottleneck was basically to do by ourselves. So to do more with the same people. And the only solution to do this was basically to learn this skill to our software developers. Well, this was basically the result of, let's say, the analysis that we have done. And let's say that there were some facts that were, supporting our ideas to do so. Well, developers are awesome at programming, so why not involve them to develop also end-to-end tests? Developers also are professional when it comes, to have knowledge of the functionalities of the system. And this means that they can really provide important information about, the value of the tests that needs to be automated. From the other side, developers are a kind of profile that every day learns new things. So why not learn to be good testers also with a little bit of coaching? And since we were, in this agile culture of working, it was basically obvious that we needed to consider test automation as an integral part of agile software development and not a separate one. Well, it seems quite good. We had a lot of facts that basically were supporting our ideas, but we had to talk with the software developers because they were the main actors, of all this model that we were trying to implement, and we needed to have them on board. So I talked with them, and well, the main concern from their side was basically this concern of what would happen with their profile. So would they still be software developers, or would they turn into test automation engineers? Well, this was clarified, of course, because our idea was not basically to change their profile unless someone of them didn't want it to turn into a test automation engineer. The idea was basically to help the team to basically succeed in this problem and in this bottleneck that was having in manual testing. And also the main reason was basically the need that we have in our bank to create this, T-shaping profiles. So people with a core expertise, but also knowing a broader range of other knowledges and mastering them. Well, explaining this, they accepted. I must admit, they were very open-minded developers, and I'm still thankful for this because they are a key part, of the success that basically we are having with experimenting this model. But of course, they had a requirement, which was totally legitimate, I must say. They said, okay, let's be skilled in test automation, but please let's try to do this, in a way that we are having fun. So let's try to create a great developer experience, and let's try to break a little bit this bias of having testing activities as boring and frustrating. Well, of course, I accepted, and in fact, this requirement, it's a requirement that we have taken in consideration when we choose the tool that currently we are using for writing our end-to-end tests. Well, so we have found our solution, and we had the main actors on board with, in order to implement that. And now we had to face basically this challenge of implementing test automation. And this challenge for us was composed mainly of two, let's say, dimensions or two perspectives. The one was the developer perspective that we needed to build, but we already have because we were software developers. And from the other side was the tester's perspective. So in order to do in the right way test automation, basically we needed to own the developer perspective, and we owned it. So basically our people, being software developers, were able to think over the architecture of the system and the necessary mechanism for launching them, like the continuous integration pipelines. They needed how to write good code because being software developers, they basically write code based on a lot of practices and patterns. And of course, at the end of the day, we need to think that the auto tests are the same development program as the product that they are designed to test. But if we felt comfortable into this developer perspective, when it comes, to the tester perspective, that was the part that we needed to have, a real upskilling, because our software developers needed to know what is at the end software testing, what is a testing methodology. They needed to be able to know basically and to understand the weaknesses and the capabilities in the system, and to master the product, at an acceptable level. So they needed to learn a lot, when it comes to this tester perspective. For this reason, we have started, and we still are in progress with this program of upskilling the software developers in this testing perspective, because we see this as a process very dynamic. We see it as a part of the employee development program, and we see it as an approach long term in order for the organization to stay on track with the evolving skills demand. We are following two methods for the upskilling of our software developers. The one is the self-open learning, let's say, method, where they follow different online skills development sites to learn about different topics when it comes to test automation, and also the process or pairing with local leads in test automation or in other topics. Another approach that we are following is the curated learning model. Being part of RBI group is basically great thing because you are part of the programs that RBI has created from some year now. We have an active participation into the Go IT academies for upskilling in test automation basics and test automation advanced. And of course, being part of the group has helped us to accelerate into adopting easily and quickly these skills because of the collaboration and the reuse of different standards that specifically the Guild of Test and Test Automation has created. So we started our process of upskilling, and well, as a team, we knew that we want to do this right. We wanted to do this in a way that everyone is have the same understanding of what we are doing and the approach that we are following. We don't want it to do this just for the sake of running and writing some extra lines of code that tests something. So for this reason, we decided first to build test strategy and basically to define and write and document the approach that we are going to follow. Being developers and starters in this process, we defined, let's say, a lighter approach developed in the form of a checklist. When we documented basically our test basis, our test objectives, we developed a test plan with the necessary schedule, resources, and defining test levels, techniques, and tools. And we presented it for all stakeholders to make it officially as, you know, the standard that we as a team was following, but also as a standard that also other teams and the bank needs to follow and do the same. As part of our test automation strategy, we decided to have test automation as part of the definition of done of our sprints. And I must say that this decision that we have taken was a great one, because having test automation as part of the definition of done of every sprint has permitted us to have, a continuous progress to do test automation and to don't create any room to postpone automation activities inside a sprint for the sake of other most important or most priority activities that basically are related with developing new features. So this was great. And in this process of doing automation inside the sprint, of course, we have decided to don't be too rigid, you know, with metrics or with KPIs, because let's be sincere, it's very difficult to have good automation in 2 weeks. So for this reason, we thought that, okay, we are going to have automation in 2 weeks. And we are going to do this, you know, in a strategical way. What does this mean? This means that if we have to automate a specific test case, and in 2 weeks, this is impossible because it's a short time. Also, we need to consider that our developers were not dedicated in these activities. They have only 1% of their daily allocation to work on test automation. We did different analysis, you know, of the test case, and sometimes we have made even decisions to see that, for example, different parts of the test case can be pushed on lower levels of tests like unit tests or integration, or sometimes we have, you know, followed this approach of putting the system, you know, in a previous state before the one that we need to test, and then test, you know, only the UI part of the functionality. Well, these were, let's say, trade-offs to have at least, you know, automation in these short iterations. As part of our test strategy, we also defined a model that would help us to define which are the most valuable tests. When we started this process, We had an already system with a lot of functionalities that were all manually tested. There were at least 60, let's say, test cases that were tested manually. But it's obvious that we couldn't automate them all, and we have to find a way how to find which were more valuable. And we found this model that is basically a very famous one developed from Dorothy Graham, which is a pioneer in testing. The model is what to automate, and it aims to estimate each test case based on some criteria like customer risk, value of test, cost of efficiency, and history. And it creates a score for each test in order then to define that the most valuable one are only the test cases that results in a score in green, so with a score between 65 and 100. So we documented also this model to be, let's say, an example for for other experiences. From this process, we identified that only 35 tests were valuable to be automated. Well, having defined in terms of documentation, let's say, the approach that we will follow, the next step was, okay, we need to find a tool basically that will help us to write tests and to automate them. Well, we have some specific needs. We knew that we were software developers. We knew that in our daily work, we are not working 8 hours with writing tests, but we had, a percentage of our time to work with that. And this specifics, let's say, of our profile brought, this needs. Basically, we needed a tool that was easy to install with minimal configurations. We needed a tool that was completely modular with no dependencies. Well, being web developers and having, a good bond with user interfaces, we wanted to have a tool that has a user interface, but also it needed to have this headless mode in order to have the possibility then to build, this continuous testing capability that we needed to achieve in long term. The tool needs to have this solid documentation because we were starting to do test automation, and in parallel we were learning, so we needed the documentation to support our needs and our difficulties. Also, being software developers, we needed to have this capability of debugging because, our developers thought that in order to have this process of testing not frustrating, we need to debug in order to find problems easier. This would help us basically to have more fun and to have a good developer experience in testing. And of course, we were looking for a tool that was open source, a sustainable open source. So we have done a lot of research. I will not stay, here because it would take another presentation. But we have worked at least 2 months trying and doing different proof of concepts on different tools in order to see not only their capabilities and their capabilities to support our our application, but even also our bond toward them, because we wanted to do automation and to have a good experience with these activities. So at the end, we decided to work with Cypress because we found that Cypress was a very sustainable open source. Basically, it had a great and a rapid adoption in popularity, let's say, and is recommended as a top tool, to be adopted for test automation compared with others like, for example, Puppeteer or Test Cafe. So I will not explain more about Cypress because in Tesena Fest, I saw that there is a great session with Philip, which basically, is an expert and he explains very good all the capabilities of Cypress. But I will mention some features that basically our developers love about Cypress. First of all, it has a great documentation. I think that it's impressive how those guys create such a documentation where basically for every problem that you have, you can find a reference. It's amazing. Also, their community and their GitHub activities are a lot. So basically, for problems, you even can find different solutions that, and this help you a lot to speed and accelerate, you know, in your difficulties. It is a tool that is modular, so for developers it's really easy to use it because don't have any external dependency. It has everything bundled, so under the hood it works with Mocha. It has embedded the different libraries like Chai for assertion or Sign-on for spying and stubbing different methods. Cypress is a tool that runs on a node server, basically is executed and runs in the same instance side by side with the application, and this gives the possibility to the users and to the developers to basically have native access on everything that happens with your application, like the DOM or the usage of the web tool, which is very important for web developers. You can also inspect everything that happens under the hood with different network traffic, and even manipulate them as per needs that you may have. Cypress has a very good user interface, and the experience that you have is amazing because you can have this time travel into every step of the test and to see basically what happens before the step is running and after the step is running. You know, how you have a clear view of what is happening, not only with the specific assertions of your spec files, but also even with other things that happens under the hood of your application. And you have the possibility also to check and to test a responsive design if the application has such a solve. So we have chosen Cypress. We loved it a lot. We have started to write tests. First of all, we had those 35 existing regression ones that we had to automate. But it's obvious that our final, let's say, scope is to build this continuous testing capability. So having automatic tests that support our speed deliverables into our environments. I think now that we have at least 6 months that are doing test automation, I think that one very good decision that we have taken was basically to treat the automation project the same way as we treat the software project. And currently, our automation project is in the same repo with the software project. So we follow the same standards and the same process when it comes to a code commit of new tests and basically pushing them into the repo. We triggered the same build pipeline to check also to do some static analysis of the code. And also we trigger at the end, you know, the running of the test. So in the same way as we do with production code, with feature code that are developed and committed from the developers. This has, you know, permitted us to be serious, you know, when writing tests and to have the same level of, you know, of responsibility as we are writing tests for new features. When it comes to building, you know, this capability of continuous testing, currently we have developed, or we are following two approaches when it comes to building the respective pipelines of running our tests. We currently have the pipelines of running the smoke tests in dev and UAT environment after the automatic deployment of the features, because we need to be sure that on every release that we do, the main critical functionalities of the systems are not regressed, while the full suite of the tests is scheduled and run with a separated pipeline on a nightly basis. Well, in the beginning, I must say that we had some problems with the trust that our stakeholders had, on the reliability of the tests. And for this reason, we thought that if we report in an exhaustive way all the information that is related with our tests, so what is going on with our tests every night, and basically having every test linked with the respective video that Cyprus provides for the test run, it would be great helpful for them to basically check day after day and continuously and slowly, start to build this kind of trust. And in fact, yes, it happens. In the beginning, there was less trust in this process, and I remember that sometimes even if we automated a test, they're still tested manually, basically to check that it was, covered everything as in the automated one. But now, let's say that we are a team where we all have the same level of confidence and trust in, having our test reliable and relevant. Well, I would close here, and as a final thought, having this experience with test automation, I can say for sure that developers can test. Developers can learn how to test. It's necessary to support them on learning. It's necessary to support them on creating these programs, special programs where they can gain these skills. And from our experience, I believe that having software developers that are quality advocates is a huge gain for the organization, because at the end it serves, to a much more better success for that. Thank you very much, and I hope that our use case can be helpful to some other teams that are in the same situation, and maybe they can be inspired to try, and why not have even more success than us. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Blerina, too. And let's jump into the questions, because we are running out of time a bit, but I think we still have 7 minutes or 10 minutes to finish the questions, and then we can still have a 5-minute break. So that was Blerina Nasto and her talk about software developers in test automation. Thank you very much. And these are the questions. So I will read it for you as during the previous talk. So how do you solve this conscious bias issue? It means, for instance, that functionality shouldn't be tested by the person that developed it. So this is kind of independence in testing.
Yes. When we started to think about this, yes, we also have done a lot of researches, and we know about, this bias. But we believe that everything everything that we do inside the team, it's should be a team approach. So everyone should be involved in doing every activity that is involved at the end with the delivery. And I don't believe in this. Basically, believing this is not having trust, I think, into the people that work with, for the same vision and for the same objectives. And our situation basically has proved that this is not relevant. Yeah, honestly.
If I could add to that, I shouldn't answer the questions, but I can't help myself. I believe you can do some kind of independence check within the development team, because you can have some peer reviews, or some other colleague could check your code or test your code base. So I believe this would work even you don't have like a independent testing team. So that's my...
Yes, well, I said that we treat the automation project the same way as the software project. This means that on every code commit, the code is reviewed, from senior developers, and this is relevant since for code of the of the software, also for the code of the test. It's the same treatment. Basically, that are code that aims, the same and target the same application. So they deserve the same treatment. So yes, this is so important.
Okay, I agree, and thank you for that. Thank you for the question from Hannah, and thanks for the answer. The second most voted question was from Jirka. Do you still operate without QAs? How developers like to test?
Yes, we still operate without QAs, and I believe that in our organization we will never have a dedicated QA department. Working in, and especially in banks, have some restrictions that are, organizational one. But this, not having a QA department doesn't mean that you cannot develop qualitative products. And I think that a lot of other organizations don't have QA departments, so I don't think that it's a must. And speaking about agile software development, when we have to embed every activity inside the team, this doesn't mean that you necessarily need to have a QA inside the team. This is my belief.
Okay, so for all of us who do the testing for ages, we should adapt as a developers to build a test automation within the nowadays teams. That's the idea.
Well, Marcel, the presentation, it's not to open any debate when it comes to who can do better test automation. No, for sure, test automation engineers can do better test automation because, they are dedicated roles and specialized into that. Developers don't have test automation as a core expertise, but I truly believe they can help. Even if you have inside the team a test automation engineer, having a developer that earlier, before delivering, do some tests in order to provide a qualitative product to the test automation engineer helps even to decrease, the overload that the test automation engineers can have. And having developers that writes and automate tests means that if you have a test automation engineer, he can focus on more important activities. For example, building frameworks or building reusable components that the developers can use. So I think that the exchange of responsibilities can be in that way that at the end the collaboration could be also great. But in our situation, I said, is exception. We don't have QAs. What can I say? This is, organization structure. And in this situation, we managed to find a way how we can basically solve this kind of problem.
I really like the idea. It's very provocative and maybe eye-opening, and it just forced me to think about how I was always used to some departments or team, or at least some members of the team who were focused on the quality, but this is a bit different approach. So
Marcel, I think that with our experience, because we were the one that started to do this, so basically we had an entire, management that basically, let's say it clearly, don't understand the real benefits of test automation. Having now, a real use case where they can see the benefits, well, it means that maybe they can think to invest into having at least one dedicated test automation engineer inside the team, because I think that it's amazing to have it. But as I said, our situation is specific. So
I see. Yeah. Okay, let's move to another question, because I'm just checking the time and we don't have too much. So 5 minutes, and maybe we will skip the break for today for after the second talk. What type of test developers write? What type of test developers write? Unit integration or even end-to-end? I think you was talking about that, so I don't know whether.
Yeah. Well, as developers, for sure, we have always covered unit tests and integration tests. With this approach and this presentation, the idea was that we have jumped into the UI, let's say the highest level of the test pyramid that are functional tests. So let's say that now we are covering all of them, let's say.
Perfect. Just very quickly, two more. Let's make two more, and then we will have a 3 minutes break again. Hello, what about performance testing? I think that's again the question about performance testing. Do your dev team perf testing also? So do you also conduct some performance testing?
To be honest, no, we don't do performance testing. And let's say that till now, we are more relying on, experience and let's say, on our experience and our gut feeling, let's say. But it's important for sure to have it step by step.
Okay, so the last one, because now then we need to have a short break and prepare for the next talk. Do your developers do any kind of manual testing or just covering happy day scenarios by automating tests, which have very little to do with the real testing?
Okay, the approach that we follow now is that for every user story that is defined in our sprint, our business colleagues inside the team, as part of the acceptance criteria, they put also the definition of the test scenarios that are relevant to be automated, because are part even of the scenarios that they would test in a manual way, and they describe also the necessary data that are needed to be tested in order to fulfill that. So based on these scenarios that they define with the steps and the data provided, we automate them. We don't do it manually.
Okay, perfect. I would stop here because we are really running out of the time. Thanks for the great talk. And you can see that you provoke a lot of people to ask questions.
Yeah, well, I know.
Brilliant.
It's a hot topic, yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
What will be next? After awesome talk from Blerina, we will have Jan and Rohit from eBay, Germany, talking about their journey in software testing and how they cope with the challenges and problem and how they do web development and software testing in eBay. But before that, let me just thanks to all of our partners and supporters. We have a pretty long list of the companies and communities and different interested groups who support us this year, and I'm really excited to share the list with you. And then I would like to also thank you all of our brilliant speakers. We have 19 speakers and testing stars for this year conference. So thank you very much, guys, that you join us and share your stories and your experience. Apart from that, I would like to also invite you for the next week session. We are starting next week again on Thursday from 3 p.m. So you can join us and see another stories. The topic will be good practice. There will be 3 talks again. You can see the details. I will not read it here because we have just, I think, minus 15 seconds. And we are running also workshops. The first one will be tomorrow, and then every week one workshop, usually afternoon. So join us there as well. So, and now I would like to invite Jan and Rohit from eBay. I hope, guys, you are with me.
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I'm here too.
Cool. So let's start. I think I'll just hand over to you. I believe you prepared your introduction. So I leave it on you.
That's fine. Thanks, Marcel. So yeah, just for you all to know, so Marcel did a great talk at the meetup that I organized in Berlin. So the Ministry of Testing meetup Berlin, I think it was last year. So that was awesome. So, and yeah, let's see if Rohit and me, if we can provide something valuable here as well. Let me start sharing my screen.
Okay, perfect. The stage is yours. Now I'll just...
Yes, okay. Microsoft Teams. So, can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Let me press present. All right, so sorry for the short delay, but we're using another system usually for conferences and our daily work. So yeah, today we're going to talk about how we develop and test software at eBay in Germany. So my name is Jan Eumann, and Rohit will also cover a lot of topics. Just for the start, I mean, we're talking about our team in Germany, so we're just a very small part of the overall eBay organization. So what we're going to talk about applies to our team and not necessarily to other teams at eBay. For the agenda, so we're going to look a little bit at our team structure, so for you to understand a little bit better how it looks like in our team. We're going to talk about what we call the embedded tester model. We're going to talk about our test strategy in our agile environment, and a little bit about our bug handling process. Yeah, so with that, a little bit more about myself. So my name is Jan Eumann, like I said. So I'm currently the test engineering lead and manager for the other QE people in our team, and at the moment also for 2 mobile developers. And yeah, at eBay since 10 years now this year. Rohit, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining. So myself, Rohit Singhal, and I've been with eBay since 2018, and I'm currently working as MTS1. The full form stands like member of technical staff, and I have like 7 or 7.5 years now working as a test engineer.
All right. Okay, to get started, so just some facts about eBay in general, because it's usually a good way to understand the scale of the projects that we're working in. So in Q2 2021, so eBay had a GMV, so that stands for gross merchandise value. So the amount of or the value of stuff that was sold on eBay, it was about $22 billion. So if you do the math, it's almost $3,000 per second. We have 1.5 billion live listings on our different sites across the world. We have around 160 million buyers. So that means people who have bought at least one item on eBay in the last year. And as you can see, a lot of these transactions are coming from mobile. So about 14 billion out of 22 are actually happening in combination with mobile devices. And for Germany, just to give you an idea, so for example, a car part or accessory is purchased every second, a video game every 24 seconds. So there's quite a lot of traffic on our pages. So if we work on something, yeah, we should better make sure that we test and develop it carefully, so not to cause bigger interruptions. Yeah, with this, so about our team. So our team is called the Regional Development Team for Germany. So because overall eBay is structured into domain teams. So you have a team that is taking care of the homepage or the search functionality, checkout, or multiple teams rather. And they cover these domains for every marketplace that eBay is in. For example, so the checkout team is based in the US mainly, and they will cover ebay.com, ebay.de, UK, and so on. That works really well, but there are sometimes things that are special in the markets, and this is where this regional development team idea comes in. So our role, our mission is to build and enhance the experience for customers specifically in Germany. So for example, to improve the existing customer experience because there are different expectations for payment methods, for example, or different trust expectations and so on. So that can mean that we actually work together with domain teams owning some part of eBay, so then we come to an agreement of how we can work together, and we might make code changes directly in their code base, and then discuss how we organize the testing process, for example. But it can also be about developing new features for Germany specifically. So there's something called eBay Plus, which is in Germany and Australia only at the moment. And we've just, over the last years, so we implemented a rewards platform for Germany where people can collect points for buying and selling on eBay.de. So yeah, it's important to notice that we really work across domains and platforms. So right now, so we have a lot of projects for the web and MWeb platforms, but also for Android and iOS. So we have one Android, one iOS developer in our team. And we also work on features that are directly integrated into the eBay app that you can download from the stores. Good. With this, Rohit, do you want to talk a bit about our team structure?
Yes. So, like what Jan said, so we are a team which started I think 7 years ago or 8 years ago, I guess. And so initially in this team there were like 4 or 5 members, but now the team has grown to like 24 or 23 members currently, which includes all the roles like project manager, developer, tester, and head of engineering. And when this team started with 4 or 5 people, we were working on a single project, but like Jan said, currently we are supporting like native, and then we are working with cross-domain teams across Australia, Spain, and Switzerland, and so on. So what we did now is basically we came up with a structure where we work in streams rather than on a single project. We work on multiple projects parallelly. So that's why we call that as a work stream, or you might be familiar with the Spotify squad model. It's almost similar to that. And and if you have questions like why we went with this team structure, so I would say like this is the third team structure that I've been with in past 3 years. So I would say our team is quite agile, and we keep on changing the structures that work according to our needs and our requirements, and obviously the projects at hand. And now if you take a look closer to our team structure, for example, in stream 1 and stream 2, you will see almost similar roles, but overlapping roles. So for example, we have a product owner or a product manager who will also do some parts of like testing sometimes, or maybe helping developers to, doing configs or something like that. And similarly, when it comes to a tester, he or she is not just like doing the quality assurance work, but also sometimes helping developers in like whatever they can, right? So that's why we kind of not just do like a limited role, but we have like overlapping roles, and that's why you see like different colors in all these circles there.
Okay. Yeah, so as a next step, as you've seen on the previous page, so we usually have a tester in the stream team or in the project team. And so the way that we call it since a couple of years is this embedded tester model. So for us, that works like that, so that as a tester, or QE, you're really part of the team. You're involved right from the start. So when a new project starts, you can join directly. So you don't have to wait until first features are implemented or anything. So you can actually already, if there's a discovery phase on where you try to understand what kind or how the project, how the solution should look like, you can join already and bring in your domain knowledge, bring in your expertise that you might have as a tester to discover risks and so on. So that's really important. The tester can also quite often be a bridge between the developers and the business or the customer service team. So translating between the different worlds, because I mean, sometimes developers might not speak the language that is easily understandable for the business or for customer service. So that can be quite useful as well. We try to do a lot of pairing in our team. So between developers, between testers and developers, between the PM and testers, just for knowledge sharing and to understand how other people work and learn from each other. Another part of the role is to educate the team about testing. So it's a bit similar to the previous talk. So just actually make the rest of the team members aware that testing is a fun job, right? So it's, for example, running some exploratory testing challenges, organizing bug bashes for the team where you start by structuring or laying out some scenarios, creating some data up front so that it's easier for people to test, and then let people explore the system and test a couple of scenarios. For skills for this level, we usually look for someone with technical awareness, so that quite often in our team, we have some people with a developer background or that are actually strong in writing automation, but it can also be a lot of different things. So we are not only looking for people who can write code. So it's really important that you, for example, that you can read code, that you understand how systems work together, these kind of things. Yeah, domain knowledge, I mentioned that already. So this is something, if you join eBay and you haven't worked in e-commerce, maybe it will take some time, but this is that we are looking for people who actually are interested and curious and want to learn about the domain. So that's the last point on the slide. So the willingness to learn is really important, especially in our team, because like mentioned in the beginning, so we might work on a lot of different things over time. So it will always be like that, okay, that's a new domain. You have to start learning about this, this domain again and getting up to speed there. Yeah, one step back now. So what is testing for us? So for me, testing is really about providing information to stakeholders. So stakeholders can be the business team, your PM, your developers, your customers for sure. And the information can be bugs that you found, things that you can confirm that they seem to work, risk that you uncovered with your testing. And testing, I would always divide it into two parts, like checking and exploring. So checking is the part where you actually know, when I do this, I expect exactly this to happen. But there are also things where you don't know what to expect from your system, and this is where the exploring part comes in, right? So that you can actually learn about your system, that you can uncover new risks that you haven't thought of in the beginning. Yeah, so yeah, you can see the sources here. So James Bach, Kim Kainer, Elizabeth Hendrickson. So these are people that definitely influenced my thinking in this way, and Dan Ashby as well. So we worked at eBay for a couple of years in the past as well. Okay, so now coming to our agile approach in the team or in the teams. So we use Kanban. So we don't use Scrum. We don't have fixed sprints. So, and our board, yeah, usually looks like this, so that we have a section for ideas, where we put in stories or ideas, bugs that are not yet finalized or not yet discussed with the team. We have a backlog column where actually the stories and the bugs are already discussed with the teams and in the grooming session or in smaller groups. We have a column in progress where, yeah, we can actually see which stories are currently being worked on. We try to do a lot of pairing here so that usually two people work on the same story. I have to say that now with the working from home for a long time, it's gotten a little bit more complicated to always have two people working on one story because of the working times might be different, picking up kids from school and so on. But we usually try to have more people working on the story so that people are aware of what's going on. So, and sometimes it might just be an initial discussion to yeah, think about how to implement, how to tackle that problem, then working a bit alone and then coming back and doing the code review in the end. Then we have awaiting acceptance, which is basically about then confirming the ACs that are in the user story, doing another round of exploratory testing to see if something is impacted that yeah, we didn't expect. And then we have our column done, so where we collect the stories that actually are tested, implemented. And then for the applications that we own, we can actually decide when to do a release. Let's say we have 3 stories and done that are related to one application, and then we could decide to do a release whenever we think it's a good point of time. So for example, Rohit and me just did a release to production before lunch today. So we investigated, looked at, okay, what are the changes? So checked that they're all tested, and then did the release, monitored in production to see that there are no new errors occurring, checking that the bugs or the stories that were implemented are actually then also fixed in production. Another thing about awaiting acceptance is this is, of course, the QE people do a lot of the testing of those stories here, but everyone in the team who is free is supposed to pick up a story when it's in awaiting acceptance and not assigned to a person. Overall, we try to have really small stories so that they can move through the board in 2 to 3 days on average. So of course, there are stories that are faster and there are also stories that take longer. But if we have a lot of stories that take longer, we usually try to sit down and see, okay, what's the reason for that? So are we blocked at some point by dependencies? Did we not split the story accordingly so that it actually can be small enough to move quickly through the board? So that also means that the testing usually doesn't take up a lot of time, right? So it's a small story, small changes, so that the testing can be fast as well. So Rohit, anything I forgot here?
No, actually, you covered everything. I just want to add, like, in our team, we are pretty flexible in like who picks up the story. So it's not like a dev will always, pick up a story or do the development. But if as a tester you are comfortable in doing something, for example, I like to pick up a lot of stories sometimes, and everyone is okay about it. And then the same thing like what Jan said in awaiting acceptance. So when, for example, if I move that story to awaiting acceptance, it can be a dev or a QE who will take care of it. So in that way, we are pretty flexible in our team as well.
All right. So let's move on to the next slide.
Sure. So now basically let's talk about like what is our test strategy and at what levels of a complex system we do testing, what all areas we cover, and multiple things, right? So basically we picked up an example of one of the features that we built recently. So this complex structure looks like, we are talking to like a lot of different services and DB and front end and back end stuff, but I will go to a simple architecture as well later. But just to highlight a couple of things here. So for example, on the left, you see external events. So for external events, you can think of something like, say, somebody purchased an item on eBay or sold an item on eBay, right? Then something will happen in the background. So that could be like an external event. And then in the backend, all these service 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these are all different services like domain services, or it could be like a small service as well doing a specific or having a specific logic, and obviously database. And then the important thing in the front end zone is basically the service 6 and service 7 you see. So we at eBay basically have an experience service kind of architecture. So if I say experience service, it's basically, imagine something like you have 5 platforms, right? For example, you have mobile web, you have iOS and Android apps, and you have web platform, right? So to serve all these platforms, we don't build like different endpoints. So we will have one service which will actually be capable to serve all these clients. So that's why we call them experience services. And in the end, we have added a link as well. If you want to read more about the experience service, feel free to read about that as well. But let's proceed and go look at actually a simple architecture of a system. So right, so this, I guess all of you might be familiar with this kind of architecture, right? So you have a browser, it could be a native client as well, like Android, iOS, or a mobile web client. And then those clients are basically talking to your front end, and then your front end is talking to your back end, which will then, it could be like a single service, or it could have like multiple downstream services, right? So just imagine this architecture for now, and then we'll basically proceed and see like how we individually test all these artifacts, and then what all coverages we have, if we do some automation there, if we do some end-to-end testing there. So let's basically go to like each chunk of this architecture. Right, so first and foremost is the backend, because obviously backend is important. And so what is our backend is, like I said earlier, so it's basically having all the logics of your system. So it will contain your business logic, and then it will serve your experience services. And then obviously experience services will talk to the clients. And what we do in our backend, if I talk about testing, so we heavily focus on unit test and integration test. And I understand like when you build a new service, we can't really have like integration test in place, right? So that's why we have mocking services in place, where we basically mock our downstream services if let's say that API is talking to a downstream service, and that's how we build like component tests or we build like contract tests. And also for a specific service or a specific artifact, we do our code analysis. So we have internal tools at eBay, which basically does all these code analysis. Also, we use Sonar for our code analysis. And similarly, we basically perform stress testing for specific backend artifacts, or you can imagine like a single endpoint. So that's all we do. And like Jan said, in terms of tracking, so basically we also regularly monitor all these errors or exceptions that are generated, and then we basically fix those or maybe create tickets to handle those in the next releases. But the crux is basically in the backend we try to test the business logic which it's trying to provide to the experience service. Next comes the front end, which is again a very crucial part because this is how your UI is served. And again, in front end, this is not something like end-to-end testing, but this is like checking the front end components. So in this, again, we basically try to do unit tests and integration tests. Again, if we don't have a backend responses ready, then we will do integration tests based on mocks. And talking about our tech stack for front end, like Jan said earlier, we have different artifacts as well where we serve different applications, and we also talk to different domain teams. And a different domain team meaning could have like a different architecture. Maybe they're using React, or maybe they're not using React, right? So that's how we also try to leverage what current architecture or what current tech stack the team is using, and then on top of that we build specific unit tests. So if it's React, then we will use like the React test, or if it's not React, then we go for like regular JUnit tests. So that all depends like what we are using there. But again, we try to focus a lot on unit tests and integration tests. And I would say like most of the time our developers are writing unit tests and integration tests, but as a testers, we always monitor like what unit test coverage we have, what integration test coverage we have, and also sometimes like our management, or I think like all of the management likes to look at numbers, so they also look at like, okay, what's the coverage for this particular artifact we have. So that's why we also heavily focus on unit tests and integration tests. And then is basically imagine like a single endpoint, but it's talking to like multiple downstream services, because that kind of architecture is very common at eBay, because you have an endpoint which will talk to like multiple downstream services. And then when it is talking to multiple downstream services, it brings another set of complexities, because let's say in this diagram, service A changed their response, right? Then obviously the backend or the API that I am building will fail if I'm not notified about like how has the response changed or what has actually changed in service A. So to reduce that kind of risk, what we do is basically we end up building contract tests. So that's how we figure out like, okay, if the contract test change, then we know like how to fix those tests or how to update our services. So that's why we have contract tests there. And then most of the times I've seen issues with like incompatible API changes, because this service A is owned by some other team, right? And they might not know that our backend or our API is dependent on their service, right? So again, to reduce that, we have integration tests there, but also we support other teams. So for example, if service A or service B has changed, and if they know that our services are dependent on them, either they will let us know, or we will let them know, like we are dependent on you, and if you make a change, please do test our services as well, and vice versa. So that's how we support other teams as well in testing. It could be manual tests, or it could be like fixing their service contract tests or integration tests that they have written. And to also reduce another risk of like performance, we have a load and performance test. And this is kind of one of the requirements where if we make a change to any other service in, let's say, other domains, it's a requirement to always look at load and performance test results before they will merge our changes and deploy our changes to production. So moving ahead is basically, I think the most important part for all the testers is basically end-to-end tests or end-to-end testing of when your all systems are integrated at one place. And that's all what we do as well. So we have end-to-end tests where we basically try to test our front end, back end, and if let's say our backend is not ready, then again we'll use mocks. But the whole idea is to have like how a user will perform or will do on our website. So that's why we have end-to-end tests. And like I said earlier, we focus a lot on unit and integration tests. So our end-to-end test coverage is very, very low. If I talk about, let's say, one of the artifacts or one of the features that we built recently, I think we just have like 10 or 15 end-to-end tests which run and nothing else on top of that. And to have more visibility in testing and to cover a lot of bugs in terms of front end as well, we have visual tests, which will then compare your current screen versus the expected screens that we're looking for. And that's how we also do visual testing. And on top of that, we also perform accessibility testing because that's really crucial. And if I talk about tools, we have an internal tool as well, but also we rely on the tools that are available in the market. And again, load and performance, because now we have a whole integrated system. So that's also a part of in our testing. And like Jan mentioned in the beginning, because we have a lot of traffic on some of the pages, so we also track performance or page speed for particular pages that we observe has a huge traffic. Moving on next, like I said, now this is the clear picture of basically end-to-end tests. So in end-to-end tests, like I said earlier, we try to cover the whole system. So here you can imagine now we are actually not mocking up anything, but our backend is actually talking to the different downstream services. So here we, like I said, we believe in very low end-to-end tests. So that's why you have like smoke tests. So we basically cover like basic core functionality of our features, and if that's working fine, then we are sure everything is working fine. Again, we have performance test, visual testing. Important part now here is security test, because we do it for all our endpoints or artifacts, and this is also done by internal tools that are provided by eBay. So we use pipelines, and these are like CI pipelines that runs every day on different artifacts. Again, accessibility tests, and we also use internal tools that supports testing.
Yeah, here it's also important to mention that we also build tools to support our testing. Like, for example, Rohit built a Slack bot where you could just enter into Slack, create a user for DE, and then you will get a user for the QA environment within eBay, or more complicated test data creation services tools to list the user data to actually make it much easier for you to understand how many points a user has in this reward system, for example, or a way to send an event to actually give the user 10,000 points if you need this for your test cases, or if you, for example, need to test the limit so that you can send a 100,000 points event and then the limit is reached, right? So that you can check these kind of cases as well.
Yeah.
Next, yeah, there's one topic that I also would like to mention is our bug handling process. So, so on the right side, you can actually see the number of bugs that are in our system. So the red line is the number of bugs that are found. The green one is the number of resolved bugs. And what you can see, it's from 2018 when our team basically started. And yeah, over time, we own more and more applications. So that's also a reason why the number might go up. But what you can see here below is that in the beginning, we were pretty good at maintaining a very low number of open bugs. We had some spike around June 2019, and it was very stable. And then during the last year, you can actually see that the number of bugs was increasing and increasing and increasing until this point, actually at pretty much end of 2020. And what happened last year is that we had a lot of projects on our roadmap. We were under a lot of pressure, and we actually didn't prioritize P3, P4. So more or less bugs that are not impacting a lot of users, that are not really critical, but we weren't really good at prioritizing those against the new features that we had to deliver. So what we did then is to introduce a new bug process. So, I mean, in general, for our team, if we have P1, P2 bugs, so they are put on top of the backlog and put into progress, and other people will take up these tasks and stop for a while on the tasks that they worked on before. But to actually be better at handling the bugs with lower priority, so we introduced a process where one pair, so developer, tester, or two developers actually work 1 week, so one pair every week on triaging and fixing bugs. And so we introduced that process at the end of 2020, and as you can see, so over time we managed to get back into a stable state. Yeah, we always need to be careful whenever we stop this process for project pressure, some special week that's happening at eBay, the number might go up again. So that's a constant process. And what's important also is that we have a very direct feedback channel with customer service. So we have a shared Google Sheet where they enter problems that are reported by customers, and then we have people in our team looking into this sheet every day, investigating the cases, maybe clarifying if there's a misunderstanding and it's not really a problem, or it's not a bug, but it's a misunderstanding on the customer side, which might need a bug fix as well if really the documentation is not clear enough, or then filing a bug really into our project because there's a serious problem or a problem in production for maybe a small number of users, but I mean within eBay, so with the numbers that I mentioned in the beginning, so even edge cases might have a lot of people complaining to customer service. Rohit, anything, because that's a new part, anything to add?
No, I think you covered everything.
All right, then I think we are running a little bit out of time. So yeah, for CI/CD pipeline example, do you want to quickly run through it, Rohit?
Yeah, let me try to cover that quickly. So like I was saying earlier, so we have everything in basically we follow CI/CD practices. So with just one click, we can deploy to production whenever we want. But before deploying to production, it comes the part like running all the tests that we talked about earlier. So we have a unit test, integration test, contract test that basically runs with every commit that we built, so that we know like this artifact or this particular release version is good to go. And obviously, like I said earlier, we have our accessibility test, security test that basically keeps on running every day. And if anything goes wrong there as well, we fix that before we deploy anything to production. And so in terms of like deployment, our artifacts are first deployed to stage where we, as a testers or anyone who in the team he or she, if they want to test it, they will first verify on staging. Then the artifact goes to pre-production. So we have a pre-production environment, which is a replica or a copy of a production environment. So we can validate things there before actually moving to production. And yeah, for front end and back end, we follow the same kind of approach. Just one thing to add, if let's say it's a new service or totally new framework or an artifact, we basically deploy it to feature pool before even merging to stage, so that this can be tested locally before the changes goes to stage. So that's why you see in the beginning that we have deployed to FP, which is a feature pool in the beginning.
Okay, so that leads us to the summary. So yeah, of course, a test strategy usually depends on the context. So like I said, we work on different domains, different projects. So the test strategy looks slightly different, of course, for every project. But overall, it is very similar to what we presented here today. Automated checks and exploratory testing complement each other for us. So that's very important. So we're not trying to replace all the exploratory testing, all the testing that is done by humans. So we don't want to replace this. We actually want to automate everything where we check for known things, where we actually can move it to a unit and integration test. That's even better. And then make more time for our smart people in the team to actually uncover new things using a critical mindset and exploratory testing. Yeah, Rohit mentioned that. So many low-level tests, just a few end-to-end tests. Yeah, these exploratory approaches, we can actually apply them continuously. So there I can, if you refer to Dan Ashby again, so he wrote an excellent blog post about that. But for example, what we can also do before we start a project, we can do something called a risk storming session, where we can think with the whole team about, okay, what kind of risk can we think of right now? So that's a way to actually uncover information before you even start implementing a project. Yes, so I mentioned that. So we build tools to increase testability, both for the automated checks. So these kind of services that create test data can also be very useful for the automation, but also for the exploratory testing, because I believe in the easier it is to create a specific scenario, even if it's very complicated, the more likely it is that a lot of people will try this in their testing. If it will take you 2 days to set up a scenario, you will maybe do it a couple of times, but not on a regular basis. And yes, regular monitoring of our production systems, this closed feedback loop with customer service is very important for us to get fast feedback on how our quality is in production. Yeah, with that, so oops, sorry, wrong direction. One more slide about some sources if you want to learn more. So there's this excellent book, Lessons Learned in Software Testing. So I picked this up every year again and read some of the chapters, and I learned something new from it. So it's because I'm in a different context. I have a different knowledge at this point of time, and I will take it in a different way. Exploit books and a couple of blog posts mentioned here as well that I believe are very good sources to learn about testing. And with that, yeah, we are done with our presentation, and Marcel will probably tell us if there are a lot of questions.
Oh, yeah, there are many questions, so let's go through them. And I'll now share my screen. So thank you very much for your talk. This was Jan and Rohit. And let me share the questions. So first one, which was voted as maybe the best one from during your talk. Do you do performance testing on mocks or real endpoints, or both? Which tool do you use for performance testing?
Yeah, I can take that one. So we basically do our performance testing on the real endpoints. I don't remember if we did our performance testing on mocks, but maybe Jan can add to that. And regarding the tools, so we use JMeter as, I think it's an industry-wide use tool. So we also use JMeter for our performance tests.
Yeah. Yeah, so actually it's both. So we have some performance tests that we run against mocks. So when we want to test our service, right, the performance of our service, then maybe we use mocks for the other services that are called in between. And then I think we have a job, or we had a job for one project where every night it runs against our service and everything else mock, just to detect, okay, is there something that impacted the performance of our system that we control with the recent changes? Yeah, so that's one approach that we have.
Okay, thank you, David, for the question. And now the question from Hannah or Veronica. Okay, Veronica is the most voted second question. Do you experience the challenge of the custom-made features clashing with logic of main global solution? How do you detect such a points and negotiate?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Yes. Let me think about it, if I can think of an example right now. So yeah, overall, so I mean, there is a global process at eBay to prioritize projects. So if the business unit in DE wants to have a certain feature, it will go through a process of a lot of planning and discussing. And I think at that point, hopefully, it would be discovered that this would be a problem, because we in DE want something working in a different way than the other markets. So we try to avoid this if possible. If there's no way to avoid this, yeah, So we, for example, what we have is that there are different payment methods, for example, in Germany, right? So, but that's maybe not a different logic in that case. It's just offering a different set of options for the buyer. But yeah, in the end, it would be about if there was really a big clash and we would need this, it would be a matter of discussing with the team owning that part of eBay and convincing them that we really need this. So there we would need to work for sure together with our business units to make the case really strong to convince the other teams. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So let's move to the next one. Who is responsible for security testing or tests?
Well, do you want to take it? Yeah.
So like I mentioned, so we do it for our backend endpoints, like running security tests. So we don't have like a defined responsibility there. So for example, if so I can talk about a recent example because I started working on a project, like it's a new endpoint that we are building. So we in the team, so basically the developer created the job, the CI job, which will then trigger the test. But then I will keep on monitoring those tests. So it's like it could happen to vice versa as well, that I will set up a job which will run the test and somebody else in the team will keep on monitoring the test. So at least in my experience, we haven't had any defined responsibility, but it's always dependent on who's working on which endpoint and who's interested in building that job for running the test.
So the whole team need to have some kind of capability to deal with security testing. That's
so yes, in a way, but we also have security champions in the different teams, and so that's a group of security champions across eBay. They meet on a regular basis. They exchange knowledge. They learn about things, new threats that might be out there in production. Not necessarily at eBay, but in the world, also in the industry. And we have a central team as well at eBay that does security testing. So they do pen testing, and you can request that as well. But it's a mix. So of course, the team, I mean, by using approved components, approved tools, and so on, so to build your application. So we try to avoid some of the security issues that could occur. And then, yes, we have our team is responsible for some parts, but then we have a central team as well that we can reach out to for support.
okay, cool. So let's move to the next one, and that's, I guess, yeah, the one from Irka. What's your level of test automation, and what kind of testing tools do you use? I think.
So I'm not clear about the first part of the question, like what's your level of test automation? If that's like what kind of coverage we have, then I would say like we basically follow the pyramid, the test pyramid approach, where you have a lot of unit and integration tests and very less end-to-end tests. But I can quickly talk about testing tools. So if it's about test automation, then eBay has its own internal framework that we call as Breeze. So we use that. It's Java-based framework, but also it's in a specific team, you are free to use whichever tool basically suits your project or suits the team. So for example, I was recently using Cypress to build a framework that could support like multiple projects that we have internally. And prior to Cypress, I was building frameworks with Selenium as well. And if it's native automation, then we use the regular Earl Grey test or XCUI test. And for Android, we use Espresso. And I've heard like some teams also using APM for their test automation. So basically, I would say we use most of the tools out there in the market, depending upon what's suiting the team.
Okay, cool. So thank you for that, and let's move to the other one, another one, and it's from MP, and it might be a bit controversial. The question regarding the replica of your production, whether you are masking the data or how do you deal with the data?
Yes. So, I mean, a lot of the information that that you can find on eBay is public anyway, because the item information, for example, you can just go to ebay.com/item ID basically, and then you can see what the seller listed. So these kind of information is not sensitive in the way. And then the other information that is sensitive, so we shouldn't be able to access the production version of that anyway then. So if there's payment information stored, it must be stored in a way that not everybody at eBay who is a developer can access it. So that's the same then for pre-production. So then only specific teams, right? So that really might need to debug something for this should have the access level to see the sensitive information. Yeah.
Yeah, and to add to that, basically we have jobs that basically get the data from production, anonymize everything like credit cards, addresses, and all the sensitive details, and then basically push the data to production pre-prod environment. So basically on pre-prod, we don't have any of the sensitive details there.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to the second last one. That's from Jirka. Do you have experience with Scrum as well? Because I think you mentioned that you follow the Kanban. So could you compare that and tell us what do you like more or what's better in each?
Yes, sure. Yes, we a couple of years ago we used Scrum as well. I mean, it's really in the beginning of our Berlin development team. So the problem that we faced at some point is that if you say you have a 1 week or 2 week sprint, is that in the planning, first of all, it's really difficult to estimate really how long something will take. And then you have a couple of stories and they fill up, like, say, 80% of your time, what you estimate, what you think. And then you will just pick tasks that are small enough to fill up the rest, but not necessarily the one that have the highest priority. So that's why we moved to Kanban, to always say, okay, the backlog can be constantly reprioritized, and the tasks that have the highest priority should always be on top. So that's the biggest thing for us, I think, why we moved to Kanban. I also really like the flexibility of whenever we have something that is done, it can be one story for one service. And we say, well, okay, let's push this out to production because it's providing a lot of value. So we don't have to, I mean, of course, you can also do this with Scrum and release in between the sprint, but probably you will not do this. Yeah, but I mean, yes, I mean, I can understand that sometimes for Scrum, it's better that you have as a team that you have a fixed scope for a while so that you don't come to stand up next day and then suddenly your PM would say, oh, by the way, we have something new in our backlog and we should change how we work. But of course, if that happens too often, I think it's a learning in the team as well that you will see as a PM and as a whole team. If you change what you're working on too often, you will also be slower because you have to change the context, you have to understand a new problem. So we have to find a good mix of being flexible with our priorities, but maybe not changing them too often so that the team gets distracted.
Okay. Yeah, and just to add to like in my personal experience, I like Kanban more because I remember when I was working for a previous organization and we were using Scrum, like every 2 weeks our priorities were changing, I guess. And then as a test engineer, our test automation backlog was growing and growing because next sprint, new feature, we can't do test automation for the previous feature. So that's why I even like Kanban more these days.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So the last one now, and then definitely running out of time, but I think you have the advantage to be the last talk. So
yeah, that's good.
Stress testing backend, do you test single endpoint or do you have a real ratio between different endpoints? Do you have any? I don't know whether you understand the second part of the question.
So I understand it this way, that maybe that you, for example, you have 3 different endpoints and one of them gets 70% of the traffic and the other one 20 and the other one 10, that you split your testing like this. I mean, that's maybe my understanding. So no, we don't split it like this. So we would test all of our important endpoints, and then Yeah, not all the time, not with every change, but if we have major changes, then we would probably go back. And also the production monitoring. I mean, that's the best kind of feedback that we can get on our real performance. And so looking at this, getting alerts if something is getting too slow. Yeah, that's probably the way we.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually we basically like what Jan said. So we also look at alerts in terms of like the response timing of our backend, and if we see like something is going wrong there, then obviously we take a look at it. So that's why we have alerts in place, which will let us know like if something goes down or if a particular service is taking too long to work.
Okay. Cool. Thank you very much for answering questions, and thank you for your talk.